Hello, welcome. This is a GH Additional Math and Science Clinic for BC candidates. We are live on air on our various social media handles between 3 and 6 p.m. on Sundays. Now, today's lesson is on science and it's agriculture and plant life. Now, on this topic, we'll be looking at photosynthesis. We'll look at the life cycle of flowering plants. We'll look at vegetable production and then farming systems. So by definition, photosynthesis is the process whereby green plants use energy from the sunlight to manufacture their own food, which is glucose. And they do this by combining carbon dioxide and water with the help of minerals in the presence of chlorophyll in leaves. So photosynthesis is the process whereby green plants use energy from sunlight to manufacture their own food by combining carbon dioxide, water, mineral salts in the presence of chlorophyll and leaves. Now, chemically we can represent it by an equation as below. Now, the CO2 is carbon dioxide, H2O is water. What is not familiar is the C6H12O6, that is glucose or carbohydrates, and then 6O2 is oxygen. So 6 molecules of carbon dioxide is added to 6 molecules of water in the presence of light energy, with the light being absorbed by chlorophyll, and then this results in the production of glucose and water. So C6H12O6 is glucose, and then 6O2 is the oxygen. So carbon dioxide and water add up to produce glucose and oxygen. Now there are some factors that are necessary for photosynthesis to take place. The first key most one is light energy. Light energy. Now most often we talk about sunlight, but then it is not just sunlight, because you can grow a plant in a room and give it the right source of light and it will still grow. So it is light energy, but not just sunlight. Now you should bear in mind that although we are talking about the use of sunlight, a portion of photosynthesis also occurs in the dark. So it has a dark stage and a light stage. The dark stage is where it needs darkness, or it works in darkness. So although it needs light, the darkness is also relevant. Now the other thing is chlorophyll. Now the chlorophyll is found in chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are found in cells, and specifically plant cells. Now inside the plant cells where the chloroplasts are, their material is green, and that is what we call the chlorophyll. The chlorophyll, that's a photosynthetic material. Now these chlorophylls absorb the sunlight or the light energy for the process of photosynthesis to take place. And like I mentioned, we need water as a reactant, and then we need carbon dioxide also as a reactant. Now, practically we can check if these factors we are talking about are real. So we'll have some practicals, and the first one is a test that will show that starch or glucose is a byproduct of photosynthesis. Then the next will be to test to show that chlorophyll is necessary for photosynthesis. Chlorophyll is necessary for photosynthesis. And then the final test is to show light energy as being necessary for photosynthesis. Now the first test, or the first experiment, we have to test to show that starch is a byproduct of photosynthesis. Starch is a byproduct of photosynthesis. If you remember so well, the equation that we wrote, the end product or the results when carbon dioxide and water were combined, it gave us glucose and oxygen. Now, glucose is a form of a starch. So when you're able to test for starch, then we know that yes, glucose was present. Okay, so let's go through the steps. So the first step is to pick a leaf which has received enough sunlight. Now we are doing this bearing in mind the fact that a leaf would only undergo photosynthesis when it has received sunlight. So that's the first thing you look out. So you look out for a leaf already in the sunlight, then that should have undertaken or would have had photosynthesis taking place. Then our next step, we'll boil the leaf in water for about 5 minutes to kill the cells. So it's a leaf, it is still having cells which are alive, which can decay. But to destroy the cells or kill the cells, we boil it for 5 minutes. After the 5 minutes boiling, we expect that the cells will have been destroyed. Then after boiling the leaf, we will decolorize. We want to take the green color away from it, that chlorophyll pigment, we want to take it away so that we would have the leaf without any color and we can deal with it. You know, the test we are going to do is a color change test, so we need to get the color away so that we can have access to the raw thing and deal with it. So we'll decolorize it by dipping it in warm alcohol. We'll decolorize by dipping it in warm alcohol. After decolorization, you would need to clear the alcohol which the leaf would have absorbed. So you dip it in cold water to remove the absorbed alcohol. So you put it in cold water for some few seconds so that the alcohol would go out of it, or it will remove the absorbed alcohol from it. Then your fifth step would be to dip it again in boiling water for 3 seconds. This time around, you want to let the leaf become soft. You want to let the leaf become soft. So you dip it in boiling water for 3 seconds. Now you know that when you move a substance from the cold straight to a warm environment or the reverse, it causes the substance to become soft. So you dip it in boiling water for about 3 seconds, and this would cause the softening of the leaf to take place. Then the final step will be to place the leaf on a white tile, the normal tile in your homes. Then you add a drop or some drops of iodine to it. Add some drops of iodine to it. Now let's look at what happens. So our observation, the leaf will develop a blue-black coloration. A blue-black coloration. Now this blue-black coloration is the result of an iodine test when starch is present. So anytime you are doing a test and it's an iodine test and it turns blue-black, immediately it confirms that there is starch in the substance that you are testing, like your food test that you do. So conclusion is a blue-black coloration indicates the presence of starch. That blue-black coloration indicates the presence of starch. So there's a test to show that starch is a byproduct of photosynthesis. Now, the next test. So we want to test to show that chlorophyll is necessary for photosynthesis. You know, chlorophyll is the green matter, and it is what aids the absorption of light energy. So we want to test if really chlorophyll is relevant or is necessary for photosynthesis. So these steps. So you pick a variegated leaf. Now a variegated leaf is a leaf which has yellow and green patches. It's not fully green. There are patches of yellow and green on it. And you make sure, like in the earlier one, it has received enough sunlight. It should have received enough sunlight. So when you pick such a leaf, the next step will be to make a sketch of the leaf indicating the non-green patches. Now you will first put the leaf on a sheet of white paper. You draw the outline of the leaf. Then you try to locate where the patches that are not green are located. So the patches that are not green, you try to locate where they are by the drawing on the sheet of paper. So if a portion is yellow, you try to locate where it is on your drawing. Then you mark it out with your pencil. Then, after noticing this or noting these down, you test the leaf for starch, as was described in the first experiment. You test the leaf for starch, as was described in the first experiment. So you take it through all the various steps that you did. However, in this one, in adding the iodine, you look out for the non-green portions and you add iodine to those portions and look at the color change. So observations. The portions with green patches turn blue-black due to the addition of iodine, whereas the yellow patches did not change or would not change, and that is obvious because the yellow patches don't have chlorophyll, so photosynthesis doesn't take place over there. So conclusion is that chlorophyll, that's the green portions, is necessary for photosynthesis. It's necessary for photosynthesis. Now our third test, a test to show that light energy is necessary for photosynthesis. In our first test, we looked out for the fact that starch is produced or is a byproduct of photosynthesis. Then the second one, we looked out for the fact that chlorophyll is necessary for photosynthesis. Now we are going to look at the fact that light energy is necessary for photosynthesis. Light energy is necessary for photosynthesis. So let's go through. Now our first step would be to look out for two potted plants. Take two potted plants, so two plants that are already in pots. You can decide to plant them yourself or they already exist in pots. Now you put one in the light and keep the other in the dark room or a box for a minimum of 24 hours. So when you started this morning, you'd be picking up your plants the next day. So for 24 hours, one will stay in light, one will stay in darkness. Okay, now after staying in these two exposures, either of light or of darkness, you pluck a leaf each from the two potted plants. So from the dark plant, a leaf, from the light plant, a leaf. So you pick a leaf each from these two potted plants. Then you'll go through the process of testing for starch as was described in the first experiment. The same process you test for starch as was done in the first experiment. So the observation. The plant that was kept in the light will show the blue-black coloration upon adding the iodine, whereas the other will not show that coloration. So the plant that was kept in the light has a blue-black coloration showing that starch has been produced, meaning photosynthesis has taken place. But on the other plant, which was kept in the dark, no such change in color would happen. And that shows that photosynthesis did not take place. So that's the conclusion. Photosynthesis needs light energy to take place. That is why the one that was kept in the dark didn't have any starch produced. So now let's look at the importance of photosynthesis. Why is photosynthesis necessary? So our first point here is that it gives food, or it offers a way of manufacturing food for plants. So plants do not eat like you buy your food, your wachi, and eat. No, they have no such means. So photosynthesis is the only way they would also produce food for their cells and also to survive. Then the second point, it makes plants useful to herbivores as food. So you take the goat, the sheep, those animals that eat grass and plants. After photosynthesis has been done or has taken place, a plant grows and they also have it as food. Then our third point here is oxygen that is released from photosynthesis is used by animals for respiration. So when you breathe in oxygen, you breathe out carbon dioxide. So the oxygen you get when you breathe in is as a result of the fact that plants are doing their portion by releasing oxygen when photosynthesis takes place. Then the fourth one, it reduces carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So there's already carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We are burning and doing all sorts of things, also increasing the carbon dioxide content. Now, if we continue this way without plants, we will not survive. So upon production of our carbon dioxide, when we exhale air or we breathe out air, plants use carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. So they breathe in air. And that's why it's always good for us to work towards afforestation or plant trees here and there. It helps reduce the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So let's look at flowering plants. So in flowering plants, you can have monocotyledons and then dicotyledons. The monocotyledons have one cotyledon, that's seed leaf, and then the dicotyledons, like we said earlier, have two seed leaves. So monocots have narrow leaves with parallel veins. So if you take, for example, the maize plant, it has narrow leaves, and then the parallel veins run along the narrow leaf. It's like, let me say, a cutlass. That's the length, that how the leaves of the maize or monocotyledons is. And then their stems are usually hollow and non-woody. So if you take the same maize, you see that the middle of it is a little fluffy. It has some strings inside that, so it is non-woody like other plants. Examples include maize, yam, carpet grass, oil palm, other grass kinds, etc. Then the dicotyledons, we are saying, have two cotyledons or two seed leaves. Example is beans. You know the beans, you can break it up into equal halves. Unlike maize, when you pick one grain of maize, you can't break it up, or corn, you can't break it up. But in dicot, like beans, like groundnuts, you can break it up. So you are saying that their leaves are broad leaves with branching and net-like veins. So the veins in there are net-like. It is not parallel like you find on the maize, but it's in a net form. Then the stems are usually soft, or they are woody. So woody, they are like wood, heavy, tough. And the examples are as below. We have beans, we have groundnut, we have mango, we have orange. Okay, so now the parts of a flower. The parts of a flower. We have a flower here, and then it has various parts. Now when you see a flower from apart, what makes you see that it's a flower is called the petal. It is a colored portion, and that is what makes you know that that is a flower. So for most organisms, or for most flowers, the means of pollination is by the petals, or that's how the animals are able to see it. The bees and insects are able to see it. It usually comes with a very bright color. So that's the petal. Now outside the petal is the sepal. The sepal. Now the sepal is the outermost covering that protects the petals. It also protects the flower buds. That's where the buds would occur when the plant is about to burst out, or the flower is about to burst out. So it protects the contents of the buds. Now below the sepal is the receptacle, which is the portion that holds all the parts of the flower's organs. That is where all the parts are held together. Then we have the stem, which extends from the receptacle. Then you move to the pistil or carpel. The pistil or carpel. Pistil or carpel. Now this is the female reproductive part of the flower. It contains a stigma, that is the top portion. That's the stigma, and that is where the male portion settles. So it contains the stigma, that is where the male portion settles. Then there's a style, that is a neck through which the pollen grains travel. Then you have the pollen tube, through which the tube keeps traveling until it gets into the ovary. Now the ovary is the circular portion. The ovule is the eggs that are found in the ovary. So the ovary bounds the ovule. Now let's move to the stamen. Stamen. So when we were students, we used to use the men at the end to let us remember it is the male portion. So stamen. So the stamen has an anther and it has a filament. The anther is where the pollen grains are held. That's this portion. And the filament is the neck portion that is extending to the receptacle, the next portion. Now, for fertilization to take place, anther will move, the pollen grains will move from the anther to the stigma of the pistil or carpel, then it moves down through the pollen tube. So these are the parts and their usefulness. So sepals, the base of the flower, mostly green, and protects the flower during the bud stage and manufacture food for the flower. So that's about the sepals. A group of sepals is called the calyx. Then we come to the petals. These are the brightly colored parts. They attract insects for pollination. So that's what I said earlier. A group of petals is called corolla. So when a group of petals come together, it's called corolla. Now, stamen, like I said earlier, stamen is a male reproductive organ containing the anther and filament. That's the male reproductive organ, stamen. So the pollen grains are contained there. That is what is shed onto the stigma. Okay. Then the carpel. Carpel or pistil is a female reproductive organ. It has three parts: the stigma, style, and ovary. Now a group of carpels is called pistil. When a group of carpels come together, it is called pistil. But when it is one, it is carpel. Now the carpel is the stigma. At the top is the stigma. In the middle is the style. At the base is the ovary or ovules. So like I said, the ovules are carried in the ovary. So the ovary and inside it are ovules. That's the female sex cell. Now the table below shows differences between self and cross pollination. So we take the first one. So cross pollination, two flowers on different plants. Self pollination, within same flower or different flowers on same plant. That is self, but crosses on different plants. Then we go to the second point. Produces stronger offspring. When you cross the plants, because of the mixture of genes. Genes is what carries your genetic code, how you would look, how you would behave. That is the genes. So when you do cross pollination, it produces stronger offsprings. But then in self pollination, there's less stronger offsprings as compared to the cross. Then the cross has resistant seeds. By resistance, it's able to withstand harsh environmental conditions like water, like heat. But then the self-pollinated ones have less resistance because they have the same kinds of genes all over. Now we're talking about the fourth point here. It says for cross, it has more varied seeds, and that is true, just like the second point showed. There are more varied seeds or plants produced. Okay, more varied seeds or plants produced. But with self-pollination, there's less varied seeds or plant produced. So the pollination in cross-pollination has varied seeds, whereas the other has less varied. Then cross-pollination, it requires an agent of pollination, and that's key. There are two different plants, so something has to carry it from one to the other. So that is on cross-pollination. Now with self, it usually has or needs no agent of pollination. So no agent is required. It's able to get it done by itself. Then for the last point, it transfers large number of pollen grains because it is systematic. It is not mixed up. It has large number of pollen grains needed for the cross-pollination to take place. By self-pollination, transfers few numbers of pollen grains, and then the organism is pollinated. So there are agents of pollination. We talk about the insect pollination and then wind pollination. Either insects are causing the pollination or the wind is causing pollination. Now wind pollination, how are the flowers that are engaged in wind pollination like? So they are not brightly colored because they don't need to attract anybody. And then they have no nectar produced because the wind doesn't need nectar for anything. They are small in size. They have no scent for attraction. Then they produce large quantities of smooth pollen grains because they will need more to cause pollination. Because the atmosphere or the wind will take it through the atmosphere and they will settle on places that has no need for it. So insect pollination. Flowers that are insect pollinated are brightly colored, so you can see it clearly from afar. The petals are colored. It produces nectar. Nectar because insects would eat nectar and it will draw them close for pollination. They are large and conspicuous. So apart from being brightly colored, they are also large and conspicuous. It's not hidden. They look nice and attractive, or they have a nice and attractive scent. Nice and attractive scent. So the smell causes it to attract insects. And now they are stigma. The stigma is where the pollen grains land. So it has a sticky stigma. And this is to help it trap pollen grains on the insect feet. So you help it trap pollen grains on insect feet. So sticky stigma. So sticky stigma that trap pollen grains on insect feet. Now we look at fertilization. Fertilization. So by definition, it's a process whereby the male sex cells, that's the pollen grains, fuse with the female sex cells, that's the ovules, to form a zygote. So a broad definition. The process whereby the male sex cells fuse with the female sex cells to form a zygote. But specific to plants, we are saying that it's where the male sex cells or pollen grains fuse with the female sex cells or ovules to form a zygote. Now, fertilization causes the mixing of characteristics of the organism. So the male has these characters, the female has those characters. When fertilization takes place, they share some characteristics, or it is mixed up. Then it forms the seeds and fruits of the organism. So fertilization leads to the formation of the seeds and the fruits of the organism. The seeds and fruits of the organism. Now, finally, we look at the process of fertilization. The process of fertilization. So let me pick my laser. So, by definition, pollination has to take place before fertilization will take place. So, these pollen grains from the anther will certainly go to the stigma of the female part. So when the pollen grains move there, it's absorbed onto the surface. Then the pollen grains travel through the pollen tube down into the ovule. Then inside the ovule, it finds its way to the eggs. Or the ovules. The ovules is inside the ovary. So when the pollen grains moves down, locates the ovules, then it merges with it. That is the process of fertilization. Now, once it merges with it, fertilization has taken place, but doesn't end there. It binds together, comes together, forms one component called the zygote. Then the zygote grows into an embryo, and the embryo is found located in a seed. Then, upon arriving at a favorable condition, germination begins, and then a flower will eventually emerge. So this is the process of fertilization. Alright, so I would ask you to do the following reading. Look at germination and then associated experiments under germination. Assisted experiments under germination and then germination itself. So do some revision and reading on that. Thank you very much for your time. I wish you the best. Bye bye.